Hey, what's going on, guys? So I have a pretty cool project for you today, and I created this the other night. Been having a lot of insomnia lately, so I decided instead of just tossing and turning all night, I just get up and create something. So I created this Tesla car configurator, much like the one they have on their website, and we're going to be building it with just HTML, Tailwind, and just vanilla JavaScript. Now, if I were to build this in real life as a production project, I would most definitely use a framework like React or Vue because it's pretty interactive, and that's where frameworks really shine. However, I think doing it in vanilla JavaScript as a tutorial is very beneficial because it's just gonna teach you more of the fundamentals and more about interacting with the DOM. So I think it's a pretty cool project to do with just JavaScript. Now, I will be doing a React version. I don't know if it'll be a YouTube video or part of a course, but I will definitely be doing that because I do like this project. But just to give you a quick demo, so we have two images on the left, and if we scroll, it only scrolls, this sticks at the top, and we can scroll the sidebar. And we have some options like the exterior color. And on this side, we have the exterior image and interior image. And if I want to look at the car in pearl white, for example, I'll click on that and it just changes the color. Look at the blue, the solid black, ultra red, and I think this one is quicksilver. So we can just change between the colors. Now, if we want to change the interior color, that's going to reflect in this image. So this is the dark version, and then if I click the light, it'll show you the white version. So you can kind of mix and match, see what color exterior and interior you want. And then in addition to that, we have a performance wheels option for $2,500. And if I click that, it'll actually show us the car with the performance wheels. And you can change the color and it will stay, it'll show you the performance wheels with that color. And I can go back to the standard if I want. All right, so you can customize the wheels, the interior, the exterior. And then at the bottom, we have our pricing info. So the total price and then the breakdown with the down payment and the monthly payment. And if I choose standard wheels, you can see the base price is $52,490. You have the down payment, monthly payment. If I choose the performance wheels, all three of those are going to go up a little bit. And then we have other options like the full self-driving. Click that. That's going to bring it up 8,500. Click the performance upgrade. That's going to bring it up 5,000. And then we also have these accessories as well. So you can see the price is quite a bit more if I'm choosing all the features. And then at the top, we just have this bar that will slide up and down as we scroll to the top of the page. I just added that because that's what they have on the Tesla website. So yeah, that's the project we'll be building. It is responsive, so the images will stack on top of the options if if you're viewing this on a small screen. And as far as the code goes, I have the GitHub repo. There's a lot of images, so you'll have to download these, right? So you have all the buttons, you have all the different versions of the car. And then I also have a Codepen that I'll put in the description if you want to try it out. I wouldn't suggest using this code because it's a little different, because if I'm on the red version, for instance, and I choose the performance wheels, it's going to go back to the original stealth gray. It doesn't stay red. And that's just because of the way I had to deal with the remote images in Codepen. But if you want to try it out, you can, of course, visit that link. All right, so yeah, I think it's a really nice project to just kind of jump in and get into some JavaScript. We are going to build it from scratch, meaning we're going to type out most of the Tailwind, most of the classes and the HTML. But if you want to skip that, I'll have timestamps and you can go right to the JavaScript. So it's completely up to you on how you want to follow along. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so like I said, we're going to start from absolute scratch. I don't even have a folder created or anything like that. And I'm going to leave the final version open just in case we need to reference it for anything. So, and you can create a folder just on your desktop through your operating system. I'm just going to use my terminal. I'm in my dev folder, and I'm going to make a new directory for my project, and I'm going to call it Tesla-configurator, and I'm going to add vanilla.js just because I plan on building multiple versions of this. And then I'm going to open up VS Code in that folder. And of course, you can use a different text editor if you want. And I just have an empty directory. So let's start to create some files. And it's going to be pretty simple. We're just going to have an index.html. And then let's have our CSS folder. And in that, we'll have a in that, we're going to have a style.css. We're using Tailwind, but there are just a few custom styles that we're going to add as well. And then in the root, we're going to have a folder for our JavaScript, and I'm just going to use a single file called main.js. Okay, and then we just want an images folder. And then what you're going to do is get the images from that repo in the description. So let me just grab those real quick. So these are all the images. I'm just going to bring these over. We don't need the screenshot. All right, so we'll just bring those over, and those are like all the different versions of the interior and the exterior, the buttons, things like that, the logo. All right, so now we're ready to start on some HTML. So I'm just going to add a boilerplate with Emmet, so exclamation enter. And for the title, we're going to say design your Tesla Model Y. And then I'm going to link in the style sheet that I created, so /CSS and then style CSS. And since we're using Tailwind, I'm going to just get it, the easy way and use the CDN. So if we go to Tailwind, I think that's the link there. But if you go to Tailwind CSS and just go to docs, you'll see this play CDN link. If you click that, you just want to grab this script tag. I probably should have that as a snippet. Okay, so we get that, and then we're also going to be using the Font Awesome icon library, so I like to get that from cdnjs.com, and if you just type in font, and then right here, Font Awesome, copy the link tag, and we're going to paste that in right there. Okay, and then for now, actually, you know what, let's link in our script tag as well down at the bottom here, so script source, and say JS and main.js, and then we'll just put hello. And then I'm going to open this with Live Server, which is a Visual Studio Code plugin or extension. You don't have to use it, but that's just what I like to use. And there we go. And you can see Tailwind is being implemented. There's no margin or padding, and the font, you can tell by the font as well. Okay, so now we're ready to just kind of build this out. We're going to start top to bottom. We have the top bar, and later on we'll have some JavaScript that'll make it go away when we scroll. But for now, we're just going to have it there along with the header. So let's add those two things first. So we're going to come down into the body. And again, if you want to skip this stuff and you just want to go right to the fun part, the JavaScript, you can do that. But I like to do things, front to back. So I'm just going to comment each part here. Now the top bar, since we're going to have that little bit of effect with JavaScript, I'm going to give it an ID of top bar, so we can grab onto that later. And then as far as classes, we're just going to add some Tailwind classes. Let's do bg-gray 100 for the background, and I want it fixed to the top. And then the positioning, we'll do top 0, right 0, and left 0. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of padding on the y-axis, so py2. And then a paragraph with, let's say, text center, and let's do py2 there as well. And then font, I'm going to do semi-bold. And of course, if you want to change anything to do with the design, you can. So this text is just going to say 0% APR available for, for qualified buyers. Okay, so if we take a look, there we go, we got our gray bar. And then right under that, we're going to have the header, and that's going to use the HTML5 header tag. And then as far as classes go, I'm going to make it a flexbox because there's two items, which are going to be the logo and this icon here, which on the Tesla website, this will open up a drawer menu with the languages, but I'm not going to add that. But it is a button, it just doesn't do anything. So we want to align those in a flex row, so I'm just going to add the class of flex. We want the space to be in between, so justify between, and to align vertically, let's say items-center, and then we're also going to do padding on the x-axis 10 and padding on the y-axis 6. And let's do margin top 16. And I'm adding the margin top because the gray bar is position fixed, which means the header will be put behind it. So we want to push it down with the margin. And then let's add an image. We're going to add our logo. So images/logo SVG, and then alt Tesla. And then I'm just going to add a width of, let's say, 120 and a height of 24. So we should now see our logo. Then we want that icon, which I'm actually going to wrap in a button, even though it's not going to do anything. And then we'll have our I tag with the class of FA-solid, as well as FA-globe. That'll give us that globe icon. And then we're just going to have a span next to it with a font bold class and say US. Okay, so that'll add that for us. Now we want to add the layout, and if we look at this, you can see we have a wide column on the left and a more narrow one on the right with all the options. And we want this to stick at the top. See how it stays, but we can still scroll the side? That's how we want to do that, and we can do that with the sticky class. So what I'm going to do is add a main tag under the header. So let's say main, and then for the classes, we're going to make that flex, and I want it to be a flex column to begin with, because on small screens we want it to be a column, meaning everything is stacked, right? But when we hit the medium breakpoint, which is right here, we want it to be a flex row. So what we can do with Tailwind is say on medium screens and up, then we want to say we want a flex row instead of a flex column. That'll make it responsive. And then we're also going to do justify between, and let's do padding on the x-axis 4. Whoops, what am I doing? Padding x-4, and then on medium screens and up, I want px to be 10, and then padding y 6. Okay, so that's our main tag. Now inside that, we're going to have the image section, and then we're going to have the sidebar. So let's start with the image section, which is going to have a section tag, and it's going to have a class of width full, meaning it takes up the entire container, but again, on medium screens and up, then I want the width to be, let's say, 3/4, so 3/4 of the screen. Okay, and for now, I'm just going to put some text in here and say image section, just to make sure that everything's lined up. And then in the sidebar, that's going to be in a side tag, and for that, we're going to do same thing, width full, but on medium screens. And when I say MD, that means the medium breakpoint and everything wider. So it's not like you have to do medium and large and extra large and so on. So that's going to be width dash and then 1/3. And here, let's just say sidebar. All right, so if I save that, we should be able to see if the alignment is correct, which it looks right. Once we hit below the medium, then they stack, which is what we want. All right, and there's a couple other classes I want to put on the aside, so we might as well add those. I'm going to do padding left 0, and then on medium screens, I want to do padding left 8. And let's do a little bit of margin on the top, MT6, and then on medium screens and up, we want no margin on the top, so MT0, and then a z-index of 2. Okay, now let's go into the image section, get rid of this text, and let's add our exterior and interior image, right? So these two right here. And those are, like I said, I want them to be sticky, so we're going to have a div with the class of sticky, and then top-24. So basically it's going to stop right here. I'm not exactly sure what this measurement is, but you can see it does scroll down a little bit, the images, but then it sticks, and that's because of that top 24. And then inside that, we're going to have, I'll just put a comment here, let's say exterior image, and that's going to be in a div with a height, an H96 class. Let's do BG gray dash 200. Let's make it a flex. Say items dash center, justify center, and I want to do an overflow of hidden so that it doesn't overflow into the sidebar. And then a margin bottom 4. Okay, and then in that div is going to be the image, and that's going to have a couple classes. We're going to do max width full, and then height auto, and I'm going to add transform because I want to scale it up a little bit with scale 125 because it's a little small. And then for the source, it's going to be images, and we're going to just add the first color, which is model-y-stealth gray. So all the cars with the colors are going to be called Model Y dash and then whatever that color is. And then for the alt, we're just going to put Model Y. All right, and then we also want an ID on this image because we're going to be bringing it into the JavaScript. So we're going to call this exterior image for the ID. So if we take a look, you should see that. And then if I don't have the scaling, right, if I get rid of the transform and the scale, you'll see it's a little too small. That's why I added that scale. Now for the interior, very similar. So we can actually, I spelled that wrong. We can actually just grab that whole div with the image and paste that in, and then change this and the ID to interior. And then we're going to change, let's see, the image is going to be images/model y/interior dark. And then for the alt, we're going to call that model y interior. So save that, and now we have the interior image. Okay, cool. So now let's jump over to the sidebar. And there's a couple headings. So we'll have an H1. Let's do text 5XL, make it really large, and then text center, and then let's do font bold, and we're going to do margin bottom 5, and the text is going to be Model Y. And then under that we'll have an H2. Let's make it a little smaller. So text XL, text center, and then let's do font light for that. And that's just going to say customize your car. Okay, so there we go. There's our headings. And then the first set of options we want to add is the exterior color, which are going to be these icons. It's going to be a button with an image inside of it. So let's go right under the H2, and we'll put a comment here. Let's say exterior, or we'll say exterior buttons. And I'm going to give it a class of my-8 margin on the y-axis, and I'm also going to give it an ID of exterior-buttons. Now I'm putting the ID on the wrapper of all the buttons instead of on the buttons themselves because I don't want to add an event listener on every single button. I'm going to add an event listener onto the div, and then we're going to look at what we're actually clicking on and say if it's a button, then do whatever. So we're using event delegation here rather than putting an event listener on every single button. And then let's see, we're going to add our heading. So H3, let's say font dash semi-bold, and we'll do a margin bottom 2, and we're going to say exterior color. Okay, underneath that we're going to have a div that wraps the buttons. It's going to be a flex box. Add some spacing between each item on the x-axis, and then let's add the button, and these buttons are going to have a transition dash transform class and duration dash 300. The reason for that is when I hover over them, we want to have that smooth scale. Okay, so we're going to add that, and then on hover, let's see, put that in there, and then on hover we want to scale. Let's do scale 110. Okay, and then the button itself, the image itself is going to have a class of width 22, and it's going to be / this first one is going to be button, button dash stealth gray is the first one. And then the alt, this is really important because we're going to be using the alts in the JavaScript. You want to put the name of the color here, so it's stealth gray. All right. And then, yeah, that should give us the first one. Okay, and it'll shrink down as we add the others. So let's just copy, let's take this button. There's 6 of them total, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then the second one is going to be pearl white. So let's change the color here to pearl white, and then the button itself is going to be button dash pearl white. Okay, so the second one's white. And then we got the next color, which is deep blue metallic. So it's going to be button dash deep blue metallic. And for the color, for the alt, we're just going to say deep blue. Okay, then we got solid black, I believe is the next one. So let's change this to solid black and change this to solid black. And then we got the ultra red. So we're going to change that to ultra red. Ultra red. Okay, then finally we have the Quicksilver. All right, and there we go. So there's all of our different buttons. And let's see, why are they not hovering? Oh, I put a space here. It should not be a space. All right. Okay, so now we have that smooth hover. Now the interior buttons are very similar. So let's go under this div, the exterior, and let's say interior buttons, and this same thing, we're going to have a class of my8, but then we're going to have an ID of interior dash buttons. Okay, and we can probably just copy the H3, the div, and I guess the first two buttons, and then just add a div on the end. Yeah, so we want to make sure we add our div on the end, and let's change this to interior color, and let's change the actual button. So that's going to be button, what did I call those? But okay, button light and button dark. So this one is going to be for the dark, so button dark, and then this is important, we want the alt to be dark, right? And then this one is going to be button dash light, and we want the alt to be light. And let's change the size. They're a little too big, so instead of 22, let's select both of these and make it W12. There we go. Now I want to have a class where we have this border for the selected one. So we're going to have some very simple custom CSS for that. But let's add on the first button in the exterior, so the stealth gray, let's add a class right here of btn-selected. And then I'm also going to add that onto the first interior one right here, so btn selected. Now let's go into the style CSS and let's just add the styling for that. So it's btn selected, and we're going to do border is going to be 2 pixels solid, and the color will be CCC. And then border radius, it's going to be a circle, so we want to do border radius 50%. Okay, then we want to have some padding. We'll do 8 pixels for that. And then add a transition to make it smooth on the transform. And we'll do 0.3 seconds. And there we go. So now the first one has that border. Now I actually don't want to have the hover effect on the selected one. So what we can do is say btn selected and then the hover state. And then I want to set the, let's say, transform, and we'll set the scale to 1, which is just the original size. Now the Tailwind is going to overwrite that, so we're just going to add the important flag. And now these ones you can see hover, but this one does not. All right, so let's go back to our HTML, and we're going to add the wheel section. So let's go down below the last div, and let's say wheel, or we'll say wheel buttons. So this is going to be a div with margin bottom 8, and we're going to have an ID of wheel dash buttons. And then an H3 with, let's do font dash semi-bold, and we'll do margin bottom 2, and let's say wheels, and underneath that we'll have our button. So we're going to do width dash full for the button. We're going to do padding Y4, some margin bottom, BG dash gray dash 700, which is the dark gray. That basically means it's selected. And then let's do text dash white, and I want to make it rounded, so rounded large. And then I'm going to add the transition colors class so that when we hover over it, the color is smooth. And we can add the duration dash 300 class. Okay, now on hover, I just want to add after the BG gray 700, we'll say hover, and it's going to be BG gray 600. And let's also add hover text dash white. All right, and then inside that, we're going to say standard wheels. Okay, let's just take a look. There we go, standard wheels. And then we'll just go ahead and copy this button down, and let's change this text to performance wheels. And we're just going to, in parentheses, say that this is an extra 2500. And then we're just going to change the class here. Let's see, I just want to have BG gray 200 for the initial background color. Oh, and we want hover text white, but not text white without the hover. There we go. All right, now we're going to do the full self-driving, this thing right here. It's a card with a checkbox inside. So let's go down below the last div. We'll say full self-driving option. Okay, so we're going to have a div with the class of border. And let's do padding 4, margin bottom 8, and then we'll make it rounded. So rounded LG, and let's do shadow. Okay, so in that, another H3 with font semi-bold, and margin bottom 2, and we're going to say full self-driving. And then we'll have a label with flex, and let's say items dash center and space X3 for some spacing. We don't need a for attribute, so we can get rid of that. And then in the label, we're going to have the input. Okay, so input, and we're going to give it a type of checkbox. We don't need a name. We do want an ID, though, to grab this in the JavaScript. So it's going to be full dash self dash driving dash checkbox. And then for classes, let's see, class, we're going to set form dash checkbox H5 W5, so that's the height and the width, and then text is going to be blue 600. And then right next to that, or under that, we're going to have a span, and we'll add the text of add full self-driving for 8500. Oops, that should be a comma. All right, so there's our checkbox. Now we want the performance upgrade button, which is pretty simple. So we're going to go right here, performance upgrade, and let's give it a div with margin bottom 8. Add our semi-bold header, semi-bold margin bottom 2, and we'll say, what do we want here? Performance package. And then the button. So for the button, we're going to do width full. We're going to do background. Let's do gray dash 200, and then rounded LG. Yeah, rounded LG. And then on hover. So on hover, I want to do background gray 400. No space there. So performance upgrade, and then we just want to add the price. So it's going to be an additional 5,000. Oh, forgot the padding. Let's see, we want to add PY-4, and rounded. All right, cool. So the last thing to add is the accessories, the accessory checkboxes, which I think I'm just going to paste in. I'm sure you guys are tired of typing this stuff out, and you can, of course, just copy it from the final code, whether it's the Codepen or the GitHub. But I'm just going to paste that in right here. So basically, we just have a div, our heading, and then we have a div with space Y4 to put some space in between them vertically, and then just a label that wraps the span here, another span with an input and a checkbox, and then whatever the pricing is. And the last thing we want is the pricing info. So let's go down here. Let's say total price section. And we're going to have a div with the class of PT, so padding top 4, and our H3, font semi-bold, and we're going to do text dash large for this and say total price. And then it's going to be a paragraph, and I'm going to give it an ID of total price because we're going to be changing this from the JavaScript. And let's give it a class of, we'll say text 2XL. Actually, I want to make it bold too, so font dash bold. And I'll just hard code in 52, let's say 52,490 for the price. All right, so that'll give us the total, and then underneath that we need the payment breakdown, and that should be the last thing we have to add here in the HTML. So payment breakdown, and we're going to give this a class of border top, or border dash T, padding top 4, and margin top 6. And then our H3, let's do text dash LG, and we'll say estimated, so estimated payment breakdown. Okay, so underneath that, we're going to have a margin top 4 div and a paragraph. And in that paragraph, we're going to say down payment. And then we'll have a span. And this, we want to have an ID here of down dash payment and a class of font dash bold. And I'm just going to hard code this to 5,000. All right, now underneath that, so underneath this div, or no, we want to stay within the div. The next paragraph is going to be the loan term. And for this, we don't need to have an ID because it's just going to be hard coded. So let's just have a span with font dash bold. And I'm going to hard code, let's say 60 months. That's what the formula that we're going to use is 60 months with an interest rate of 3%. So let's add a paragraph and let's say interest rate with a span, and the interest rate will say 3% APR. All right, and then we'll just have another paragraph with, say, estimated monthly payment, and we'll have a span under that, and that's going to have an ID because we do want to change this. So this will be monthly dash payment, say font bold. What else? Yeah, let's do text dash 2XL as well. And I'm just going to put in here 818.65. And those numbers should be correct based on the formula that we're going to be using. All right, so now we can get into the fun part. So we'll jump into the JavaScript. And the very first thing I'm going to do is the bar up here. So we just want to make it so that when we're at the top, it comes down. If we scroll down, it goes up. All right, so not a big deal, a couple lines of code. I just added it because I thought it was a nice touch, and the Tesla site does it. Now, the way I'm going to format this file, since it's just one large monolithic JavaScript file, we're going to have the selectors at the top and any state variables. In the middle will be all the functions, and at the bottom will be the event listeners that call those functions. So let's bring in the top bar since we're dealing with that first. And I'm going to use document.querySelector. If you want to use getElementById, that's fine as well because most of these are IDs. So I'm going to say ID of top dash bar. So we're going to bring that in. And then we're going to have a function to, let's say, handle top bar on scroll. And then I'm going to use arrow functions, but if you want to use a regular function, that's fine as well. And I'm just going to call this handle scroll. Okay, and then what we're going to do is create a variable called @top, and I want this to be true if we're scrolled all the way to the top. And the way we can do that is we have access to the window object, which has a scroll Y value, and that's the position where you're scrolled on the Y axis, which is up and down. So if I'm scrolled down 100 pixels, then that value is going to be 100. If I'm at the top, it's going to be 0. So I'm going to say where window scroll Y is equal to 0. or if it's equal to 0, then this will be true. If it's not, if we're not at the top, then this will be false. Then we just want to apply a couple classes based on that. So let's say top bar and then class list dot toggle, which will add and remove a specific class. In this case, I want it to be visible dash bar, which is not a Tailwind class. We're going to create this ourselves. And toggle actually takes in a second argument of a Boolean, as you can see here, to force. And we want to add the at top. So basically what's going to happen is this will be applied if we're at the top, if this is true. At the same time, I want to add another class called hidden dash bar if this is not true. So we'll just say exclamation at top. So if we're at the top, it'll have this. If we're not, then it'll have this. And then we just need to add our event listener. And like I said, all the event listeners will go down here. And this is going to be on the window itself. We're going to add an event listener. We're going to listen for a scroll. And then we're going to have a function, and we're going to call request animation frame, and then pass in handle scroll. We don't, I mean, you could just pass in handle scroll, but by using request animation frame, it's going to increase performance because it's used to schedule the function to run at an optimal time for smooth visual updates. Without this, then handle scroll would just be called hundreds of times, or could be called hundreds of times per second, and could potentially lead to performance issues. So you want to use request animation frame in this context. Now, if we open up the DevTools here, and we take a look at the top bar, okay, so you can see the div here, and if I scroll down, you can see it now has a class of hidden bar. If I go back up, it has a class of visible bar. So what we want to do is just add a couple simple styles. So first off, on the top bar itself, which I'm going to select it by its ID, I want to add the transition just so it has that smooth effect on the transform. We'll do a half a second, so 0, 5 seconds, and then ease, we'll do ease in, out for the effect. And then for the visible bar, I want to add a transform, and I want to add translate Y, which means to move it along the Y axis. And when it's visible, I want it to be in its where it's supposed to be, which is 0. Okay, that's the position it's in now. So let's say translate Y and pass in 0. But then for the hidden, I'm just going to copy this down. So for the hidden bar, we want to, instead of 0 on the translate Y, we want to say negative 100%. Oops. So negative 100%, which is going to bring it up 100%. So it'll basically be up here, right? And then when it's visible, it'll be down here. And since we added a transition, it'll smoothly go in and out instead of just appearing. So let's save that. And I'm going to scroll down, and you see that it went up. I go back up, and it comes back down. So very simple, you know, a couple lines of JavaScript and CSS. Now let's get to the options here, and we want to deal with the exterior color. Now before we deal with the image at all, let's just make it so we can click on one of these and it gets selected, and this border gets put on whichever one we click. So we're going to bring in a couple things up top, not import. So we're going to set the exterior buttons, or no, let's say exterior color section, I guess we'll call it. Yeah, so exterior color section, and then we want to select from the DOM, so query selector, and we want to select the ID of exterior dash buttons. And then we're going to do the same thing with the interior. So let's select exterior here and here, change it to interior. All right, and then I want the two images, right? So this is the exterior image and the interior image, and it has that as an ID. So let's say const exterior image. Set that to document dot query selector, and it has an ID of exterior dash image. And then we also want the interior. So again, we're going to select this. Oops. We're going to select this and this interior. Okay, so we're bringing in those things. Now let's create a function here to handle the color selection. And this is going to handle both the interior and exterior color selections. So create a function, handle color, I'm going to call it handle color button click. And we're going to pass in the event parameter here. Use an arrow function. And then I'm going to just create a button variable or initialize a button variable. And I just want to show you, and I'm kind of explaining this to people that are new to JavaScript as well. You probably know a lot of this, a lot of you guys, but on this event, there's a target property. That's whatever we click on, right? So if I come over here, I open up the console and I click on this, and it's not working because we need to add our event listener. So let's take the exterior color section, and we want to add an event listener and add a click. And when that happens, we want to call the handle color button click. We also want it to run when we click on the interior button, so we might as well add that as well. Just change this to interior. All right, so now if I click on one of these, you can see it shows the image, right? And it depends on exactly where I click. If I click like right here, it shows the button, so we have to address that. If I click in the middle, it'll show a div, right? If I don't click on the button or the image. Because I have the event listener on the entire div that wraps this. So we need to target whatever we're clicking on. And we can do that by looking at the tag name property. If I do that, if I click on this, you can see IMG, right? If I click like over here in the corner somewhere, there it is, button. If I click in the middle, div. So obviously we don't care about clicking on the div, but if we click on either the button or the image, that's when we want this, whatever we're doing, to happen. So let's add an if statement here, and we'll say if the tag name is equal to IMG, then I want that button variable that we created to equal the closest button, which I can do event.target, which is the element we click on, and let's get the closest button. Okay, so closest is a method that we can use to get the closest element, whatever we put in here. And it'll set that to that button variable. Then I'm going to say else if, so else if the event.target, so what we click on, if the tag name is equal to button, then we just want to set button equal to the event target because we want to keep it. You know, if we click on a button, that's what we want. If we click on an image, then we're setting it to the button. Now let's go under that if statement and let's say if button, because we only want this obviously to run if we click on, if that button exists, which would be if we click an image or a button. And then there's two things we want to do. We want to remove the button selected class, right? We want to remove it off that, and then we want to add it to whichever one we click. So let's loop through the buttons. So I'll create a variable called buttons and set that to event, and we'll use current target dot, and then I'm going to run query selector all, because we're going to select all of the buttons. Okay, so all the buttons that are in that current target, and then we want to loop over them, so buttons for each. And I want to remove that btn selected class. That's the class that has that border. So in the for each, we'll pass in our function. We'll say for each button or btn, and then we want to take that button and we want to remove a class. So classless dot remove, and the class we want to remove is btn dash selected. So if we save that as it is now, and I click on this, you'll see it removes the btn selected. Now obviously I want to add that to the button I click, which is in the button variable. So let's say button class list dot add, and we want to add btn selected. Okay, so we're just removing that from one and adding it to another. If I click on the blue, now it's over here. Okay, so whatever one I click on, that's what is selected. And that works here as well on the interior, because when we run that interior, that event listener, that click, it runs that same function. So the next thing we want to do is handle the image. We want the image to change to whatever color we pick. So what we're going to do is create an image map, which is just an object that's going to map the color to the actual image location, to the JPEG. So I'm going to put that, well, where do I want to put that? Let's add it right above the handle color button click. So we'll say image mapping. And we're going to have a map for, or an object for, exterior images and interior images, even though there's only 2 interior images. So let's say const exterior images. Set that to an object, and this is where we want to put the color name. So the first one is stealth gray, and this is important that this matches whatever you have as the alt. Okay, remember in our exterior images, which are, where are they? Right here, you can see the alt has the color names, so it's important that that matches the color names here. And then we want to map that to the actual image, which is going to be /images/ and then model-y, and then stealth-gray.jpg. And then I'll just copy that down, so we have, what, 6 of them, I believe. And then we'll change this color here. This one's going to be pearl white. And we want to change the name of the image to model Y dash pearl dash white. Then we have deep blue. So deep blue. And the name of the image is deep dash blue dash metallic. But I have deep blue as the alt. So we just want to make sure that matches. And then we have, the next one is solid black. So image name is going to be solid black. And then we got ultra red. So ultra dash red. And then we have quicksilver. All right, so that's our exterior images. Then we're going to have our interior images. And we're going to have dark and map that to ./images/model-y-interior-dark.jpg. And then we'll copy that down, and then this one is going to be light, and the key for that is going to be light, which also matches the alt of the interior images. Now we can come down into the handle button click, and let's go, let's see, we're going to go still within the if button, and we're going to go down here, and let's say change exterior image, and we're going to check to, we need to see if we clicked on an exterior or the interior section. So let's say if event.target, or let's do current target is equal to exterior color selection, then we know we clicked in that area. So we're going to create a variable here called color, and we're going to get the color from the alt. So, and the alt is on the button, right? It's on the alt of these buttons. So we'll say button and then query selector, and we want to select the image and .alt. That'll give us the value of the alt attribute. And then all we need to do is take the exterior image and apply the source, or assign the source to the exterior images, and then add the color as the key, right? Exterior images is an object, and then we're adding whatever this color is. Let's say it's quicksilver, then it's going to match this, and it's going to give us this image. So let's save that. Let's come up here. I'm going to click the red, ultra red. There we go. Solid black, blue, pearl white, quicksilver. Now the quicksilver isn't working, so I must have screwed something up here or somewhere around here. Images, model Y, quicksilver, yeah. Okay, so now that works. And then we're going to do the same thing for the interior. So we can actually just copy this, and let's say change interior image, and we're going to check to see if the event current target is interior color selection or section. Get the color and then change the interior image, and we're going to use the interior images map or object and pass the color in as the key. So now come down here, click that, and now you can see the interior color changes from dark to light. So pretty simple. Now we're going to move on to the wheel section, and we're going to do it two ways, right? We're going to do it an easy way first, which is going to make it so if no matter what color we're on, if we clicked performance wheels, it's going to show us the stealth gray version with the performance wheels. But then we're going to refactor it a little bit so that it'll show the performance wheels no matter what color we're on, and it will stay there. If we click on blue, it'll stay on the performance wheels. If we want to see the standard wheels, we can go back and it'll work just like the Tesla website does. But we're going to do it kind of a simple way first. So let's bring in the wheels button section. So basically this right here, this ID of wheel buttons, and we have two buttons inside. So again, we'll use event delegation. So let's say const, and we're going to call this wheel. Let's call it wheel button section or wheel buttons section. Yeah. And we want to use document.query selector, and let's select the ID of wheel dash buttons. Okay, so we got that. Now let's come down here. Let's create a new function. So this is going to handle the wheel selection. And let's say const handle wheel button click. We're going to pass in our event. Okay, and then we want to just check to see if the tag name is a button that we click. We don't need to check for an image. There's no image. It's just a straight button. So if event.target.tag name is equal to button, then we're going to get the buttons. So we'll say const buttons, set that to, let's say, document.query selector all. And we want to get from within the wheel dash buttons div, we want all the buttons. And then we're going to loop over, say, buttons dot for each. Pass in, let's say, for each button. Then I want to remove the BG gray 700 because that's the dark, right? So before we do anything with the price, I just want to be able to click on this, and then it will stay dark, and the dark class will come off of that one, and we can toggle back and forth. All right, so let's say btn.classlist.remove, and we want to remove bg-gray-700. We also want to remove the text white. Otherwise, we won't be able to see the text. Okay, so let's add an event listener for this. So we're going to take the wheel button section, and we're going to add an event listener. We're going to listen for a click, and then we're going to call the handle wheel button click. So now if I click this, you can see it removed the BG700 class from that. And then after that, I want to add the BG700 to the button that's clicked. So let's say add selected styles, styles to clicked button. So we'll take the event.target, which is the element we click on, and we're going to add a class to it called bg-gray700, and we also want to add text-white. All right, so now I should be able to switch from standard wheels to performance wheels. If I click on standard wheels again, it'll go back. So now I can go back and forth. Now what we want to do is change the image based on what is selected for wheels. So let's do this. Let's create a variable called selected wheel, and let's set that to the event.target, so whatever we click on, and then we want to get the text content, so whatever is the text in the button, and we want to see if it includes, using the includes method, the text of performance. Okay, because if the text has performance, then we know that we're selecting the performance wheels. And then we're going to update the image. So let's say exterior image, and then we want to change the source attribute. Set that, and I'm going to take the selected wheel and use that in a ternary. So if the selected wheel includes performance, then we're going to use the performance image of the dark stealth. So slash images slash model Y dash stealth dash gray, not dark stealth, stealth gray. And we want to add the dash performance at the end, and then .jpeg. Else, then we just want we want it without the performance. So it would just be this and then .jpeg. So let's go ahead and click on the standard wheel, the performance wheels, and now you can see the wheels change. I go back to standard. Okay, so we can now switch back and forth. But the downside to this code is that if we're on red or any color and I click performance wheels, it brings us back to the stealth gray. Okay, so let's make it so we can keep the color and still see the wheels. Now to do that, I'm going to add a couple things. I want to add a couple variables up at the top. So right above or right below the selectors, let's do const, and we'll say selected color. So I'm going to add that as basically like a global state value, and that's going to be stealth gray because that's the first choice, first image. And then we're going to have some, so actually we're going to make that a let because that can change. And then we'll have an object called selected options and set that to an object, and we'll have a key of performance, let's say performance wheels, and that'll be set to false by default. And then we're going to have the performance package, remember that $5,000 edition, and then also the full self-driving option. And these are all going to be false by default. Okay, we'll have some other stuff when we get into the pricing, but we're not dealing with pricing yet. So I want to have a function now to update the exterior image, because we're going to be doing this in two places. We're going to be doing it when we change the color, and we're doing it when we change the wheels. Okay, right now they're separated, so I want to have a function that we can run in both of those, in both handle button click, color button click, and handle wheel button click. So why don't we put it in between the two here? So we'll say update exterior image, and we'll say based on color and wheels. Okay, so we'll say const update exterior image, and I'm going to have a variable here. We'll call this performance suffix, right? Because when we're looking at the performance wheels, the image has this dash performance suffix on it. So we want to know if we need to add that or not. So I'm going to set this to the selected options, which is an object, and then the key of performance wheels. All right, so if that is true, then let's add the dash performance. Else, then it'll just be an empty string. We won't add anything. Okay, next we want to add the color key. So we'll say color key, and we're going to say selected color in exterior images, which is that object, that image map. And then we'll have a ternary here, and we'll use the selected color, right? And then else, it's going to be stealth gray, which is the first one. Okay, so unless we select a different color, it's going to be stealth gray. And then finally, we need to update the image. So take the exterior image. We're going to assign the source to exterior images, and then pass in the color key, which is either going to be the selected color or stealth gray. And then we need to add the dash performance if performance wheels is selected. So what we can do is we can call replace, and we'll say let's replace the .jpeg, so we're replacing the extension with, and then in backticks, we're going to add here performance suffix, which remember, it's either going to be dash performance or it's going to be just an empty string. And then we just want to add .jpeg onto that. Make sure you put the .jpeg after the closing parentheses. So again, this performance suffix is either going to be dash performance, where in this case it would be dash performance JPEG, or it's just empty and it would again just be JPEG. We'll just be replacing JPEG with JPEG because this would be an empty string. So hopefully that makes sense. Now what we can do is go into the handle wheel button. Let's do the color button first. So handle color button, and let's see, how do we want to do this? Yeah, so we're just going to replace right here, instead of creating a local variable, I'm going to take the selected color, the global variable, and whoops, didn't mean to do that. Where were we? Handle button, color button. Yeah, so we're going to set the selected button to the whatever the alt is when we click the, click these circles. And then instead of doing this, we can simply call the update exterior image. So let's try that out. Click red, black, so it's still working, right? And now it's using that update exterior image. Now we want the wheels button to use that function as well, because right now we're still going back to stealth gray. So down in the handle wheel button click, let's see, all we should have to do, instead of using a local variable here of selected wheel, we're going to change it to use our selected options, which is our global state, and we want the performance wheels. We're setting it to true or false based on if the text has performance in it, and then we're simply going to get rid of this and call update exterior image. So now if I click red, it goes to red, and if I click performance wheels, it shows me the performance wheels on the red. If I click blue, it shows me blue and it stays on the performance wheels. If I want to see it in standard, I click that, shows me standard. Okay, so it's much more flexible now. And of course the interior still works, that's separate. So next thing we're going to do is the performance button. Right, so this right here, and before we get to any of the pricing stuff, I just want to be able to click performance upgrade and have it actually get selected, just like these are being selected and staying with the dark gray. So let's add, well, first of all, let's bring in the performance button. So up at the top, const performance, what do we want to call this? Performance btn, and set that to document.query selector, and I believe it's performance, so we need the ID, so # performance dash btn. Now we need a function for that. So let's see, the function I'm going to call, let's say performance package selection, and I'm going to call this performance, what do I want to call it? Or we'll call it handle performance button click. All right, so basically we want to take our performance button and we're going to add a class, or toggle the class, sorry. I'm going to toggle the class of bg-gray-700 and also the text white. So text-white, and then let's go ahead and add the event listener down here. So we're gonna, let's say performance btn, we want to add event listener, we want to listen for a click, and then we want to call the handle performance button click. So now if I click on performance upgrade, it's not doing anything. Let's see, 107 performance button. Performance button. Is that not? Let's see. Oh, I didn't put an ID on it. Okay. So we need to just make sure we add an ID onto this. So, whoops, performance dash BTN. All right. So now let's try it again. I'm going to click on the button, and now you can see it's selected. If I click it again, then it's taken off. All right, good. Now we want to start to get into the pricing, right? We want to, if I click on performance wheels, that should change the price, and then later we'll do the estimated breakdown things like the down payment and the monthly payment. But let's first just work on the total price. So let's see, let's bring in the total price element, which is this, the number here, 52, whatever. I'm going to go back to the top of our JavaScript, and let's say const total price. We're going to call it total price element, and then select it. It has an ID of total dash price. And then we're going to have a couple variables at the top here. So I'm going to use let and say, well, we can use const for this because the base price isn't going to change. So base price equals, and we're going to do 52, what is it, 490, right? Yeah. So that's the base price. Then we're going to use let and have a current price. And that's basically what is going to track when we add and remove other things to it. It'll be this current price. And we're going to set it by default to the base price. And then as far as the options, the pricing options, let's come down here and let's create an object called pricing. And we have our performance wheels, which is what, 2,500. Then we have the performance package, which is 5,000. Then we have the full self-driving, which is 8,500. And then we have our accessories, and the accessories I'm going to put in its own object, or in a child object. So we got center console trays, and that's going to be 35. Then we got the sunshade, which is going to be 105. And then we got the all-weather interior liners. That's going to be 225. So all-weather interior liners. All right, so that's the pricing of our options, our features. So let's create a new function. I'm going to put this one at the top here. So this is going to update total price in the UI. So const update total price. Okay, and then we're going to start off by resetting the current price. Yeah, reset the current price to the base price. We want to do that whenever this runs. So current price is going to be set to the base price. All right, and then we want to update the total price in the UI. So let's take the total price element, and we're going to add text content and set that equal to, let's use some backticks here. I want to have a literal money sign and then a money sign so I can add a variable in here. And that's going to be the current price, but I'm going to add to locale string, which is going to format. It'll add the comma for the thousands. Okay, and then let's see, what should we do? Let's call this, we're going to call this in a bunch of different places wherever we're updating the price. Let's do the wheels first. So we'll just kind of start top to bottom. So that would be in the handle wheels or handle wheel button click. So we're just going to simply call down at the bottom here, update total price. Now, at the moment, it's not going to add, right? If I click it, nothing happens because we need to still add to the update total price. Because right now, all that's happening, it's being set to the base price, and then we're just adding the current price, which is still going to be the base price. So we're going to go right here, and we want to check for the selected options. So check for selected options, performance wheels, and if that's selected, then we're going to set the current price, or we're going to append to it. So make sure you do plus equals. And then we want to set the pricing. So we're using the pricing object, and we want the performance wheels price. So we're just incrementing the price by that. So now it's 52,490. If I go ahead and click performance wheels, now it's 54,990. If I click standard wheels again, it goes back down to 52,490. So we're now able to select that, and it shows us in the price. Now let's do the performance package. So I'm going to skip the self-driving. We'll do that after. But let's do the performance upgrade. So basically, we just need to do the same thing here, except we're going to change this and this to the performance package. Okay, so we're saying if the performance package is selected, then we're going to increment the price by whatever that costs, which is in the pricing object. But we need to call this within the function. So let's go down to handle performance click. So right here, and we haven't even added the selected options yet. So let's say update selected options. So not selected color, selected options, and we want the performance package. And what we can do is let's set a variable here called isSelected, because if it has the BG Gray 700, then we know it's selected, and we'll just set that to isSelected, which is going to be true or false based on if it has this class, which isn't the best way to do it, but it's vanilla JavaScript, so it's really difficult to structure your project like you would with React, where you have your individual component state and all that. That's why frameworks are so great. And then we just need to call the update total price. So now if I click on performance, you can see the total price goes to 57,490. Click it again, goes back down to 52. And I can select that and the wheels, and it goes up to 59,990. Now let's do the full self-driving checkbox. So we need to bring that in because we haven't brought it in yet. So let's say const full self-driving checkbox, and let's see, that has, I believe it has an ID of full dash self dash driving dash checkbox. Okay, so we bring that in. Then let's create a function. So you can see the process here. We add the selector, we add the option, and then we add the function, and then we add the event listener. That's kind of the process of adding a feature. And of course, you could break this up into multiple files if you wanted to use ES modules, and you can really clean it up. But this is an exercise. It's not really, this isn't meant to be some kind of, production project. So let's go down to the bottom above the event listeners. So this is the full self-driving selection. So const full self-driving, we'll call it change, because the event, when you're dealing with checkboxes, usually you're dealing with the change event, not a click. And I'm going to create a variable called isSelected and set that to the full self-driving checkbox. Okay, that element, and I want to see if it's checked. Oops. So .checked, that'll give me a true or false. All right, then I'm going to add the selected options, and we want to select the full self-driving and set that to isSelected. Then we just want to update the total price. But of course, we have to account for that in the update total price function. So let's go back up there. And we can just copy this. We should probably put comments here, like performance wheel, I guess, option. Okay, so we'll just change this and this to full self-driving. And I believe that should work. So let's save it and let's see if we click that. No, that didn't work. And that's because I didn't add the event listener. So at the bottom here, let's say full self-driving checkbox, and we want to add an event listener. But again, we want to listen for a change, not a click. And then we call the full self-driving change. So now if I click that, still not working. Let's see what the hell's going on here. Okay, that doesn't tell me anything. So full self-driving checkbox, add an event listener, full self-driving change. Okay, so we know it's running. And then we're checking we're seeing if it's checked. If it is, we're setting the selected options. Oh, forgot the I, or missed the I. All right, so now click it, and let's see, the price goes to 60,000. All right, cool. I mean, we could even shorten this up. We could do that. So now the next thing is, what do we got? The accessories. So let's bring in the accessory checkboxes, which I believe, did I even give them? No, I think they have a class that we can use. Let's see. Yeah, so each one has a class of accessory form checkbox. So that's what we want to use to bring it in. So let's say const accessory checkboxes, and we'll set it to document, and we want to use query selector all because we're selecting more than one, and then we want to use the class, so dot accessory dash form checkbox. Now I'm going to create an event listener on each of the checkboxes. So down at the bottom here above all the other event listeners, I mean, we could put it down here because technically we're just going to loop over the checkboxes and then add an event listener to each one. But we'll just say handle accessory checkbox listeners. So let's take the accessory checkboxes. Let's use a for each. And we're going to say for each checkbox, then I'm going to take that checkbox and I'm going to add an event listener. I want to listen for a change. And then I'm going to call a function that calls the update total price. Okay, then we just need to handle it in update total price. So let's go up there. Okay, so in update total price, we'll go under the full self-driving stuff and say accessory checkboxes. And again, I'm going to loop through them with for each. So we'll say for each checkbox, then I want to extract the accessory label. So the text that's in the label, like center console trays and so on, because we need to match them up with up here, these. So if we look at the structure of the HTML, we have a label and then a span and then the text inside the span. So let's create a variable here. So const, and we'll call this accessory label. And we're going to set that to the current checkbox. And let's get the closest. So I'm going to go on to the next line here, dot closest label. And from there, I'm going to run query selector. and I want to get the span that's inside the label. And then I want the text that's in the span. So we can use text content, and then we'll add trim onto it as well. All right. So basically it's going to get the label for all the different accessories. Now we want to get the accessory price. So right here, let's say const accessory price, and we can get that from the pricing object with the key accessories. And then remember, that's a child object, so we want to go inside the accessories object and then use the accessory label that we just created. Now we just need to add the current price if that accessory is selected. Actually, let's put that in a comment. So add to current price if accessory is selected. So we can do that by checking if the checkbox is checked. So if checkbox dot checked, then we're going to take the current price and we're going to increment it by the accessory price. Okay, so let's try it out. 52,490, I'll check this one. Now 52,525, that one. Awesome. So now our current price, our total price is done. We can select all these options, and it brings us up to that 68,855. Now the last thing to do is the payment breakdown, because we also want this to update, the down payment as well as the monthly payment. And there's a specific formula to do that for a loan term of 60 months and an interest rate of 3%. And that's something I had to chat GPT, because I'm not a great math person. So formulas, stuff like that, I have to look that up. It's not something I can figure out in my head. So let's first off bring those two elements in, the down payment and the monthly payment elements. So let's say const down payment element, and set that query selector, and that has, I believe, an ID of down dash payment, and then we also have our monthly payment. Okay, so we got those elements. Now let's add another function under update total price, and this is going to update the payment breakdown based on the current price. So const update payment breakdown, and first thing I'm going to do is calculate the down payment, which this is very easy. I mean, we have the loan is going to be 10% of the down payment, and to get the down payment we just need to get 10%, which is, we can just multiply it by 0.1. So let's say const down payment, set that equal to the current price, and we just want to multiply that by 0.1. That'll give us 10%, and then we can just simply take the down payment down payment element and set the text content to, let's set some backticks because I want to have a literal money sign and then another money sign for our expression, and we're going to add the down payment and to locale string to format it. Now, where we call this update payment breakdown is inside of the update total price, right? So update total price is right here. I'm going to go to the very end of it. We'll go to the end of it here, and let's say update payment breakdown. And then I want to call update total price initially. We're calling it in all those different functions, but I also just want to call it initially. So above the event listeners, let's say initial update price, and we'll say update total price. Okay, so now instead of just having the hard-coded 5,000, it gives us the actual 52,449. Okay, and I'm sorry, 52,490, but the down payment is also showing because it's 10% of the total price. So next thing is the monthly payment, and that's where the formula comes in that I had to look up. So let's go back to update payment breakdown, and we're going to create a couple more variables here. So let's say calculate. I know there's a lot of comments, but I just want you guys to know what's going on. So let's say calculate loan details, and we're going to assume, so assuming a 60-month loan and let's say 3% interest rate. So we're going to have a variable for the loan months, and the loan months is going to be 60. And then we want a variable for the interest rate, and the interest rate is going to be 0.03. Okay, so we got 3% APR. Then the loan amount, so const loan amount is going to be, it's going to be the current price minus the down payment, right? Because you put a down payment of 10%, that's not going to be included in your loan. You've already paid it. So now we have the loan amount, and then this is where we can calculate the monthly payment. And I'm going to paste in the formula here that we need to use. So this is the formula, okay, that we need to use to figure this out. So we just have to kind of write that in code. So first off, let's get the monthly interest rate. So monthly interest rate, which is easy because all we have to do is divide the interest rate by 12 because there's 12 months in a year. So monthly interest rate, let's take the interest rate and let's divide that by 12. Now we're going to get the monthly payment, and we're going to use that formula. So just if you're following along, just make sure you have parentheses and stuff in the right place. So we're going to open up some parentheses, and in that we're going to have the loan amount, and that loan amount, we're going to multiply that and then open up another set of parentheses. And in there is where we want to add our monthly interest rate, and we want to multiply that by math.pow, and we want to pass into that 1 plus the monthly interest rate, and then a second argument of the loan term months. Wait, did I not do that? Oh, I said loan months. So this right here, we should say loan term months and loan term months. Okay, so again, we're following this pattern right here where we have the 1 plus right here. So we're at this point. Now, we want to go after the third closing parentheses, and we're going to divide, right? Because now we're on this side. Now we're going to divide that by, and open up some other parentheses, math.pow, and then 1 plus monthly interest rate and loan term months. And then we want a minus 1, because again, going by the formula right here. And that's it. So that's that. This is this formula in our code. Now we want to update the text content of the monthly payment. So let's take the monthly payment element, and let's add, let's say the text content, we want to set that equal to some backticks, literal money sign, and then another money sign with the monthly payment. And we're going to add 2 fixed with 2, so we want 2 decimal places, and then 2 locale string to format it. And hopefully that works. So you can see we're at 840.86, right? If I click on the wheels, then the monthly payment goes up to 889.29. If I add the self-driving, down payment went up, estimated monthly payment went up. If we choose everything, it should be like, yeah, $1,113.51. All right, so yeah, everything is working. And again, I know that this is not the most structured code, obviously, but it gives you an idea of how to do something like this without a framework. And of course, you could take it and you can start using ES modules and separate into different files. I mean, that would make it cleaner. Remember, this is something that I just woke up and didn't wake up. I couldn't fall asleep. I had insomnia all night, so I wanted to create something. And I thought it was pretty cool. You know, it works. Might not be the best code. It's not something you're going to ship, but you know, hopefully it helped you kind of just dig into vanilla JavaScript more, because it seems like there's not a ton of content out there that isn't React, that isn't, you know, Vue.js and Next.js. So just gives you some more experience with just JavaScript. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Again, I will have a React version at some point, somewhere, whether it's YouTube, whether it's a course or whatever. And that's it. Thanks for watching.